I'm getting ready to strain this batch of bone broth that I've made overnight. So this is all finished. I usually go 8 to 12 hours, and that seems sufficient. You don't need to simmer it for 24 hours. You can, but I don't do that. So I'm getting ready to strain this. And those of you asking for a recipe for bone broth, although I do have one on my channel of how I make mine, it's dependent on whatever bones are available at the butcher when I go. So whether that's marrow bones, shank, oxtails, neck bones, it's all based on availability. So I get what I can, and that's what I would suggest to you. And since you're the one eating it, taste-wise, you have to season it to your preference. So whether you want to or not add vinegar, some people do. I do sometimes I don't. Salt and pepper I do add, and you can add vegetables of your choice. You can leave those out if you're sensitive to them for any reason. It comes down to personal taste and preference. So since you're the one consuming it, my best advice would be to experiment, and that's what I have done over the years that I've been making my own bone broth. You get into a groove. Like with anything else, you get very experienced at doing this. When I'm down to my last 2 cubes of bone broth in the freezer, that's when I know I need to make another batch. So this is something, a daily staple of mine that I consume. It's a non-negotiable for me because it has so many health benefits, and it just makes me feel really good. It's a comfort, nourishing food for me. And also how I break my fast each day is with a cup of my homemade bone broth. There really is no recipe. It's just 3 pounds of bones from your butcher, depending on the size of your pot. I don't do anything. I just dump them in, season them, add filtered water, cover the bones barely, and then I simmer them on the stove. The key is just leaving them alone. That's it. There's nothing to do, actually. So it's the easiest thing. You don't have to babysit this. So I have a Pyrex measuring bowl here and a strainer. And then I have an empty bowl that I fish out the marrow bones. And in this batch, I have 2 oxtails. I have a neck bone and a bone and shank, and then several marrow bones. So what I do is I fish those out and I set them aside because I consume those later. I don't waste that. That's precious nutrients. And I just have some tongs, and this is it. I fish them out and put them in the bowl. So for example, this is the neck bone, and it's all the meat has come off in the broth. So the bones come out nice and clean. The cartilage and the meat left. So I can handle that later. And this bone, if you can see, I'll show you. Do you see all that gel? This is why I save it, because I suck on that and I eat that. That's all collagen, that gelatin. It's rich in collagen protein and amino acids, and it's really good for the joints and for the hair and skin and nails. That's the protein. It's the building blocks of our tissues. I have the strainer here. I take a spoon and I just press to get all the liquid out. And as I've shown before, when this cools, once I'm all done and it cools down to room temperature, I transfer it to the refrigerator. And then the next day, the following day, what happens is a solid layer of tallow forms on the top, and the broth is remaining underneath. And that part I have shown, where you can cut into that fat layer and save that tallow for cooking, or I've heard that some people use that for moisturizer. I've never done that, but go ahead if you want. What I like to do is add it back to my bone broth, and then I use a milk frother and I froth it into a sort of bone broth latte, and it's really delicious that way. That's my preferred way to break my fast every day before I put solid food into my body. once the pieces are pretty much fished out, I just pour this and little by little it gets strained out. Because I have done this process so many times now, it has probably been hundreds of times over the years, because I've been making my own bone broth for so long now. It's become sort of a ritual. It's become a meditative ritual for me that I really enjoy doing. I actually really enjoy it, especially because the end product, this is a very productive activity because the end product is going to nourish my body. So it's making my bone broth is, this is part of my culture and my upbringing. So learning to feed myself and nourish myself, I take it really seriously and I take pride in this. I always remember what my mother told me, is that my body is not my own, which means it's not that I don't have bodily autonomy, but in my culture we're taught that we were given this gift and to respect it and to honor it, because we were given it. This is the product of a lineage of ancestry that has afforded life to me. So I owe a duty to my elders in the family to take care of myself, and that includes everything: my outsides, my insides, my heart, soul, spirit, mind, everything. So this is one way that I do it in the kitchen, by feeding myself, a mindful diet and a right diet by me. And as I've said before, that's going to be different for everyone. It's made with love is what I'm trying to say, which is a really important component to cooking, because the energy is transferred from the food. And whatever I eat, before I eat, it's gratitude, first of all. I express gratitude for the food in front of me, the food that I'm taking in. Practicing gratitude changes the whole dynamic of the eating experience. So this is done. Bone broth really is, perhaps if you've never made it before, the prospect of making it can seem maybe intimidating, just like anything unknown. But I promise you, once you start making it, it's not only so simple, but it's so delicious. Anything you make at home, there's a quality there that it's not something that can be replicated, unfortunately, in store-bought items and convenience items. So I highly recommend trying this out at least once, making it yourself. And then once you do, you'll see how simple it is, how delicious it is, and kneading it every day, once a day, like me. So it's all done, and this is what it looks like. My hands are all greasy from the tallow. Already you can see the fat layer starting to separate. So that's the part that will harden in the refrigerator. When I put this in it's still warm, quite a bit. It's still quite warm, so I need to let this cool down. So I'll put the lid on, put it in the refrigerator, and then, like I said, the following day it is hardened, the fat layer is hardened, and that's when I can remove it. And then what I do is, because it will be all gelled like a proper jello, in order to store it, I kind of stir it around and break up the gelatin so that I can easily portion them out in my freezer trays and then freeze them. And then when I need to, I just take one of those cubes out and put it in a little bowl or a mug, coffee mug, and I use the melt feature on my microwave. Melt it, takes about 45 seconds, and then I use I add about a tablespoon of the tallow. I use this handheld frother to just whip it up, and it whips up into a really frothy texture. And then I will usually sprinkle a little bit more salt. And that's it. That's how I break my fast every day. So I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions about anything you've seen, feel free to leave a comment down below. And otherwise, you can just comment and tell me something about yourself. That would be lovely. That way I can get to know some of you a little bit more. So you can just tell me anything about yourself, and I welcome that too. Thank you as always for watching, and I thank you for being here. Be well and stay well.